This conference will now be recorded.
Let's silence our cell phones and stand for the
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyways, what I forgot to say was welcome to the 8 o'clock work session, which started at 8:01. Michael?
Thank you for getting together this morning. We heard in the last few weeks that the board had a desire to talk through some of the potential special assessments or ditch assessments specifically, I should say, in advance of having to make a decision on them the following month. So Chris and I and Tammy are here to kind of chat through the implications there. And this is a more particular note going into 2024 because as we have viewed recently, now there's a pretty monumental shift to agricultural property taxes, shifting the burden going away from residential and commercial industrial over to a substantial increase in tillable acre values specifically. So the purpose ultimately is to talk through what was devised in at least concept last year in more of a 2 to 3 year plan to buy down some of the larger debt balances across our ditch systems altogether, and to reprise that, refresh that, take a look at it, see if the board is still comfortable with that going into 2024, and looking at some of the specific implications of doing that. So I'm just going to throw it back at Chris, and he has some examples put together for you as well, and you can just have a more roundtable, open-ended discussion as the board sees fit as well, based on the information he gave you. Chris?
Good morning, thank you.
Good morning.
This is a little unorthodox, I guess, in my understanding. Assessment propositions in the past have always been held with a small group of people and proposed to the board for their approval at a regular board meeting. As Michael had said, there are some substantial changes coming this year and concerns that ditch assessments may have an implication to that as well. I guess kind of what I want to remind everyone is that for years, the public drainage system has been accumulating debt, and assessments were based upon different criteria in the past, and that system was not maybe working as planned. This is the way that I should say. And some changes have come along recently that we have realized a little bit more depth in the systems than we had thought over the last couple of years, and that has also changed the way that we have looked at our proposed assessments for this year. And the information that was given to you this morning, you will see that you have been given a 2024 proposed ditch assessment sheet, and along with that, there is a large sheet that shows every individual system by ditch number. The second column has a ditch book balance, which means the amount of money in that fund at this time. The third column says 2023 second half tax. That is, the second half tax is an estimation. Some of these systems receive either more or less of that assessment in the spring of the year. The fourth column is a summation of all loans and interest to that particular ditch system. And the total balance, the next column in that page is, that is the ditch book balance minus the loans and interest, kind of leaves you with an ending balance. So you have that sheet, you have the proposed 2024 assessment sheet, and you also have a small packet with some maps and some examples of what the proposed assessments look like for those individual parcels.
Chair, could I interject a question real quick? The total balance is of right now. The ditch book balance was July, through the end of July, and total balance is of like right now.
Well, that
September
is,
1st.
the total balance is an estimation of the cash balance of the account minus the loans and interest.
Okay.
So it's kind of an estimated balance of where that account
Okay,
would stand today if we paid the loans off.
estimate as of today. Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Can I interject 1 second? It also includes what he's estimating the second half taxes coming in, is included in that.
Oh, okay.
You're correct.
Okay, good. Thank you. That clarifies things. Thanks.
And so I guess to start off with, is there anything that you would like me to address specifically before we start?
Anything specific? Roll into it. Okay.
Well, with that being said, we go through each individual ditch and the way that the process is supposed to work is that we're supposed to look at each individual ditch and we're supposed to forecast what is needed in terms of maintenance and repair for the next 12 to 18 months. After we do that, we are supposed to add in all of our other costs that will be incurred in that ditch system, and we are supposed to assess for that amount prior to the following year when we actually incur the cost or realize the cost. That is not the way that we've necessarily been doing it in the past. We kind of started to follow that train of thought last year and take into consideration, as Michael said, buying down some of that debt. It changed a little bit this year. We had kind of a 2-year plan on most ditches. There's a few ditches this year that we have realized that had some loans that were lingering out there that we did not know about. So that changed the dynamics of a handful of the ditches in that, but we have taken that into account for the year 2024 and have kind of regrouped and still try to present a plan that will take care of that debt and the administration costs, which the board had approved back in, was that March or earlier this year. If you guys recall, we had created a resolution that 65% of the wages of Brian and myself plus our administrative costs would be paid for through the ditch system. And so we kind of factor in those costs as well. So with that being said, I guess we can jump into the packet with the maps and the examples for you. They're just kind of random parcels throughout a few different ditch systems, and you will have a chance to have a firsthand view of what the proposed assessment means to an individual parcel, and we can work through that, and we can maybe make a comparison to a previous year, and kind of get some feedback from you as well. So the first one that you're looking at is on County Ditch 3. This is in the Janesville area. And if you turn to your example, I put an estimate cash balance, including the second half taxes, and that would bring us, and these are all not down to the cent, they're kind of rough numbers, very close, but not down to the penny. We have an estimation of $132,010. And all loans and interest to County Ditch 3 are $80,735. If we equate the administration costs at $1.40 an acre times the amount of acres in the system, 5,688, we have an administration cost of $7,962 to that system. We have some miscellaneous repairs and maintenance that we would like to do to that system in 2024 of $26,000. So with the sum of the loans, administration costs, and the proposed construction for 2024, gives us a total of $114,698. I'm going to sway off course just for a second. We've been trying to come up with a value that we should keep in a ditch fund, and talk to neighboring counties and other counties, and they try and keep somewhere between $10 to $20 an acre in the system in their ditch fund. We are allowed to keep up to 20% of the benefit value in the ditch book, in that fund. But in most ditches, that is astronomical dollar value. When you're talking systems that have a $12 million benefit to them. We don't feel that we need to keep anywhere near that type of money in them. And we would like to keep enough in them to take care of emergency repairs, maintenance, mowing, brush spraying. As I said, some emergency repairs if we're going to have some large scale repairs, reconstructions. I think that we need to look at them on a case by case basis and have some discussion between our subcommittee and the drainage authority to tackle if that project will be assessed in a 1-year assessment or if it may turn into a long-term assessment. But we're using the $15 an acre ratio. So if we did that in County Ditch 3, $15 an acre times the 5,688 acres in their system, would give us a reserve fund balance of $85,320. So if we drop down to the second set of numbers, we have the cash balance of $132,000. We have our loans. We have our loans, administration, and proposed maintenance of $114,000 will leave us a balance of $17,312. We have a proposed 3/4 of 1% assessment for 24, which would bring in $55,809, and it would leave us a balance in that account of $73,120. What that means for that individual parcel that you see on that map, that's an 80-acre parcel, and the benefits to that parcel specifically are $103,987. So if we use that 0.75%, that assessment for that parcel would be $779.80. $2,000,000.90. And that one is,
Where do you, oh, there it is. Okay. Bottom page. All right.
bottom of the page. The line below that, last year, County Ditch 3 had a 1% assessment to the system. So last year, his assessment would have been $1,039. And what I am hopeful of, and Michael and I are going to try and work through this, is that we can show you on his tax statement what his 2023 property taxes were with $1,039 assessment. And then I guess our hope is to show you what his proposed property tax for 2024 would be along with his proposed assessment.
Yeah, so we can deviate that direction for a moment. This particular piece of property is easier to look at because it's simply tillable acres. So it's pretty straightforward in terms of what's going to be an ideal scenario or comparison for looking at what that should vertically be. So as Chris mentioned, it's at $1,039.84 special assessment in 2023. And we saw essentially what that means from a special assessment narrative standpoint. So just pulling this up in our spreadsheet that you've already seen and understand, 1534 is going to round a little bit different in Excel, of course, but that 1534 is what you see right there in the county tax line for 2023. So that was our starting point, calculating what we would anticipate the rate being with the current tax base, with the current levy at 1.5%. And that would be the commensurate increase in the property tax on this particular parcel. So as you see the valuation substantially increase from an assessment narrative, appraisal narrative, we'll blend our terms, assessor's office perspective. So this one on basically the highest possible end for what the assessed value went to from page 23 to page 24, and equating to $293.65 increase. That make sense?
That's the increase in
Property tax.
property tax at 1.5%.
Yes, on this specific parcel.
Okay, I was expecting it to be. Of course, he must have that homestead. So that's pretty.
It is,
pretty
yeah,
low
so it
tax.
would be the initial tier 1, tier 2, they would calculate it at 0.5% tax capacity. So it is a homestead exemption.
That's for the year, right?
It is, yeah. So if we go back to the tax statement, this 1534 that you would have seen in 2023 would be 1828 on this parcel in 2024.
Okay.
What Chris already mentioned in terms of the special assessment, of course, would be updated there. I don't recall what that number was at the top of my head.
770,
Okay.
$780.
Yeah, so in terms of this particular parcel, the total dollar amount is effectively unchanged. Special assessment will be decreasing, the tax amount itself will be increasing, essentially your balance.
So how many acres are in CD3? So you were shooting for a 70
An $85,000 fund balance.
balance.
There's 5,680 acres in CD3 watershed. At the rate of.
So you're looking at 15 months there, so right?
Correct. Which would bring us to that 85,320.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's got $15 now.
All right.
It was getting late when I was working on this, so there could be some errors in it, but I don't know.
I didn't see that.
So I'm getting confused.
Okay.
The $15 an acre plus the 7,
Oh, that 15 is just a target for them
that's
to
just
get
a target.
research.
That's just a target for us to maintain, give us some type of a guidance to shoot for, to keep a certain fund balance in each ditch account. And we can do it per acre, we can do it by percentage of benefit, but it is just kind of easy math for us to estimate in terms of, that is kind of how we presented the administration cost. We roughed in $1.40 an acre as kind of what we felt that the 65% of our wage and benefit would cost when we took a total summation of the acres in public drainage. And we just felt that 65% would equate to about $1.40 over the 108,000 acres that the county ditch systems administers in Sika County.
So that parcel that you had up there was how big? 40 acres?
80.
80? So the total you would be paying would be, as far as dollars per acre, was how much? 779?
That was the 779 was just for the ditch assessment. 800, $10 an acre if you're doing simple math.
974, 975.
Okay, yeah, so what I'm pulling up on the screen here, if you just look at comparative years, this is 2023 right here. That is the tax, the county tax plus the ditch assessment. Same scenario, 2024. If all of these numbers held true, that's what 2024 would be.
Okay, the only thing I'm worried about is when this comes out, I'm gonna get the question of why in the hell am I paying so much per acre on these ditch assessments, plus my taxes are up so much. And I gotta explain that. And that's what I don't wanna get out of hand.
The difficult thing to explain is that a lot of these ditches have not been assessed accordingly over the years. You'll see, and I'll point out in a later example here, that we have some ditches out there that County Ditch 16 is an example in here. And that ditch, I went back and went through the electronic ditch books that we have, and I can go back to 2012, and that's never had an assessment on it until last year. And that system has had $100,000 or $90,000 worth of repairs that started in 2017, and it had a redetermination of benefits. And there are people that more than likely own property in County Ditch 16 watershed that may not even realize that they're part of the ditch system because they've never had an assessment. And, and so we have essentially kicked the can down the road for a decade with no assessments. And now we have a huge, not a huge, but a large debt to pay that is coming due in a short period of time. And when I receive these calls, and Brian receives them, and Tammy receives them, our best explanation is that in a perfect world, we may have made small assessments to every ditch system every year to maintain some type of a fund balance. Now, there are systems in everyone's defense that have incurred large amounts of debt, and their benefit value is so low that we could never assess enough to overcome the debts that were incurred. Things are changing with all the redeterminations. It's giving us the ability to assess properly and to collect what needs to be collected. But whatever the wishes of the board were in the past. It is friendly to everyone because we want to collecting assessments, but the time is here, and, we now have these debts to pay.
I realize, I get all that. And what concerns me is, there's some ditches that got a pretty good assessment last year.
Correct.
And then we go back, and we get our books up to date. And some of those ditches, yeah, they owed money already, and now maybe they owe a little bit more. Or we found out that they owe a little bit more than what we thought there was. And now we're gonna hit those same ditches again with debt that we didn't know was there. And that concerns me too. And there needs to be some work done.
Yeah.
And I just wanna find a soft spot in there without.
Well, the debts have always been there, whether
Right.
we
We
realize.
don't always know about them.
Um,
And now, I just want to go back and.
But unfortunately, the beneficiaries of the system, have an obligation to pay their debts. I can equate it to, I borrowed $20 from Brian a month ago and I forgot about it. That doesn't mean that I still don't owe him $20 that he's due. Residents of West Seneca County are beneficiaries of the drainage system, for years have also not paid a lot in terms of administration to their systems. They have paid, some very small contractual ditch inspector fees. But in terms of actually paying true administration costs, which are statutorily required, our public drainage system has paid very little towards that effort now. So, there is give and take to it, that it's a tough situation because we have a fair amount of debt. And we need to take care of it in a fairly short period of time, because by statute, if our accounts run into a loan scenario, we are supposed to be placing drainage liens upon all the affected parcels in the watershed. And my understanding from general discussions is that that has not been an action that the board has wanted to pursue, and we as staff don't necessarily want to pursue that either, as it requires a lot of staff time to record liens upon every parcel of property in the system. And so if we take a system that is debt-ridden and we turn it into a 5-year long-term assessment, that ditch continues to incur cost and maintenance along the way. And if we never pay the first debt, how are we going to pay all the debts going forward? And so I understand that there is a couple of, 2 to 3 tough years coming and a lot of questions to answer, but we really.
So what's the board's view on, what's the short term? We want to get caught up on what's our short term goal. Is that 5 years, 3 years on some of these bigger ones?
Well, I guess,
And how much do we expect the constituents to pay on that, on those ditches?
yeah, I don't know that we can
Yeah,
solve it in
that's-
2 years. I think it's got to be more like 5 years on some of these ditches that have those debts. what I don't necessarily, we gotta work on getting the debt cleaned up and not worry so much about having a positive balance. In my estimation, until we can get our debt portion down. Because you said we had 108,000 acres in ditch systems, roughly. You know, if you want $15 an acre, that's 1.6 million. In a perfect scenario, if our debt was cleaned up. And
That is over.
that would be
44
sitting in
ditch
those ditches for maintenance work, 1.6 million in a perfect world. And I would be very uncomfortable with that much money, of farmers' money, sitting in another reserve.
Well, and I mean, $1.5 million sounds like a lot of money. And it is, don't get me wrong. But when
It
you
would sound
break,
like a lot of money to anybody that's seen it.
but, when you break that apart, of that $1.6 million, there's $85,000 of it sitting in County Ditch 3. So it's a portion to each ditch.
Yeah, and I get that.
Right, and what I'm trying to, and the reason why I bring that up is because on County Ditch number 3, there is more than $85,000 of work that could or should be done to it today. And so our focus, or my focus, has shifted a little bit. When I was hired or took this position, I had kind of grandiose expectations that we were going to go out and do a lot of physical work in the ditches, get the ditches back up to shape and in good operating condition. I wasn't totally aware of the financial implications to the ditch systems. This year we have done very, very little in terms of physical repairs. They've been kind of more emergency repairs, some light spraying and a little bit of mowing. We have spent very little in terms of actual physical work done to any of the systems, and our focus has kind of switched to righting the ship on the financial end and trying to plan for the future.
But to the point of the conversation, does that all have to happen next year? No. My impetus in this is we should be putting drainage liens on these properties if they're carrying a debt. Because you're putting sales and the owners in an untenable position, because you could purchase a property with several tens of thousands of dollars of debt assigned to it and never know about it, and it never be disclosed. You have to have something that shows up in that 4-year title search window that isn't going to be a surprise to somebody after they purchase a property. So it has to be one or the other, essentially. And it can be a combination of both, of course, but if the board's desire is to spread the solution out a little bit, it has to come with the understanding that we have to record statutorily some of these liens on these properties. Not because we want to create hardship, because we want to prevent hardship for the individuals.
So if the liens were recorded and then that land was sold, that lien would need to be cleared up before clear title.
Or it would be part of negotiation.
Or it could be part of negotiation, but the buyer would probably say, no, I want the seller to clean up that.
Well, did at least know?
Well, a drainage lien is, the first lien. I mean, that comes before first mortgage. Yeah, so, that lien, would need to be satisfied.
What kind of staff time and recording fee in that is involved?
Well, we could record these as exempt, I'm sure, if they were actually of ours. If the county's recording them, we can record them as exempt.
But I went to $46 for a grant. We can record those at no cost, but it is a lot of staff hours on both the ditch and the recorder side.
And how do you think the landowner even knows that they're in arrears with these ditch maintenance monies? I mean, you
No.
can't just
Yeah, there's,
record a lien and have the landowner say, pardon me, what? I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
especially if you purchased the land within the last 10 years.
And you don't realize there's $250,000 in debt on CD 21. And you're at,
Right,
Chair,
yes.
my natural bent is to look at this list. First of all, I'm, have a little bit of shivers about the task ahead, but second of all, let's think practically here. We have some ditches that have no debt against them. We have, I think, a vision for moving ahead to make sure those don't fall into the red. Then I think we need to break down the ones that are in the red. And I think I absolutely think we have to be realistic about which of these ditch systems can we clear up in the next year? And then take those off the list. And we have to look at some of these that have multi-year debt that's gonna take 5 years. We're not being fair to property owners if we are not doing our due diligence here. If those of us that have grown up on multi-generational farms, we go, oh, this is my ground. This has always been my ground. I played in the woods as a child. We don't, unless we buy and sell a lot of property, we don't appreciate the risk that we are putting our farmers in by not having these liens recorded. We are asking for trouble. And sure, it'll only be one farmer at a time instead of every farmer in the county going, why the heck is this happening to me now? Why is it happening when our values have changed so much? But the fact is, if there's an unrecorded lien and somebody goes in for financing, gets financing, and then they find out it isn't right. I got friends that are realtors. What a mess. It will keep things from happening in the right way for people. It will really make a mess for them. It can jeopardize their credit going forward when in good faith they have negotiated a loan.
well, it ain't gonna come, the hammer isn't gonna drop on them. Yeah, there's that debt, but they're only gonna be assessed reasonable amount each year. We can't assess more than that. So yeah, it'd be a surprise to them, but it wouldn't be a catastrophic failure if they didn't know about this drainage debt against it.
The problem becomes greater at the deed level, where I convey interest in a property to you via warranty deed that says there's no encumbrances and I own it free and clear. And I don't. That's the problem. Then it becomes a title dispute.
But yeah, you own it for you, but unless that lien's on.
Whether or not the lien is recorded is not what
You still owe it. But the debt just, that moves along with the land.
But the issue of clear title is a big one for property owners.
Right now, it is moving along with the land, but that isn't the appropriate course. So for sure, in the last 10 years plus, land has been sold. That has an implication on it. We're not going down that rabbit hole at the moment, but it's just reality. It's happened. So yes, it's a matter of time. Installation of alter percent becomes more problematic But it's also just very inaccurate the way it's being done. And we're not currently complying with what the statutory implication at best is, if not law.
But yeah, we've been doing it forever.
I don't disagree. We've been doing it incorrectly forever.
So think about this. And, I got a kid that's farming. He goes out to buy an 80. He negotiates the price. He gets the financing. And he finds out there's another $80,000 of debt against it. That's not a situation I want to put the next generation in, just from a personal end.
Without the lien, there's no paper.
I mean,
It's an
we'll send the assessment out, but I know who pays attention to what their net worth is worth. Let's knock off $80,000 off your net worth just because you didn't know.
Well, the thing to remember as well is the reason that the liens exist is to not put the board in a position to say we have to pay all of this off right here, right now. That is the balance. So to say that we want to spread this out over 5 years to not put undue hardship on individual property owners, the pathway to that is the lien. That's why it exists.
So like Commissioner Walter was saying too, if we can clean some of these up in 2 years, can we avoid the hardship of getting liens on all these, can we, if we're gonna go up 5 years, are those the ones we need to put the liens on and just get these others cleaned up in a couple of years?
I would say that is a viable approach, yes, to devise a plan to say which ones can we avoid this scenario on. And look at the big courses, what action you'll take this year to collect next year, what that will buy down and clear up in totality. Even if you want to get really crazy, creative, looking at what balances are out there currently. So that, and Tammy, you can correct me if I'm veering off course here, but from an audit standpoint, the auditors are going to look at the ditch fund as a fund. They're not going to look at all of the individual balances across the individual systems, correct?
No, they have to look at every individual system to make sure that nothing is negative at the end of the year, that's the loan in general. So they do look at individually, they don't look at, oh my gosh, there's $1 million against it, so they don't look at it from that standpoint, it's just.
But that's where I was going, is at the end of the year, the loan against the general fund is looked at the total implication of the ditch fund altogether. So if you're basically pooling funds from this to pay this off to avoid the lien conversation, I guess is where I'm going ultimately. That's a more convoluted approach, but regardless, yes, I would still say look at what you can solve in totality going into next year, collecting next year, the ones that you're saying we don't feel good about doing this in a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year approach. We think it should be more of a 5 year approach and handle those separately.
If you do the 5 year approach, you're already going to be rotational back into agriculture being in the hot seat. With next year being residential or commercial, and following year you got to bend back into the, because ag got hit this year. And now we're talking about this, throwing it on top of what ag got assessed. Or, 5 years, you're going to see this, we're going to be sitting here again, some of us, or most of us, or whatever, talking about this when agriculture is going to be 3 years from now. Because it was residential next year and commercial follow.
To an extent, yeah, you're correct. They are somewhat cyclical. I think the ag will be pretty static for a few years because this was such a unorthodox corrective action. Because we were so behind that it's hard to really say egg got hit hard in my world because egg got caught up to where egg should have been a while ago. And had we had more proactive, ongoing assessment maintenance on tillable acres, we would be looking at 45 to 55% increases. You'd be looking at 7 to 10% increases. Point understood, absolutely, I completely get that. Which again begs the conversation earlier in the time frame for this process altogether. Because I understand that it would be a difficult, when I come in as the quote unquote unbiased third party, I'm the owner, I don't have these conversations, all I see is the increase. Right? I don't care why, I don't care how it got there, I just know that it went up. So fortunately, a lot of work was done and a lot of ground was recovered this year. So it creates the scenario like we looked at a minute ago that leaving everything as proposed, the dollar implication on my tax statement counting special assessment is $33, not $500. So it's not a huge sticker shock that's going to slap me in the face. It's pretty marginal at that point in time. That doesn't mean this has to be the subscription.
And this is coming from the farmer end. I mean, if I look at this situation and I look at what had to happen in the assessor's office, and we know that had to happen. I look at this and the argument can be made, and no farmer I know is going to want to hear it, that we have been unfair to our other residents to the benefit of our farmers in the last years because we haven't stayed as current with this as we should have. And that's coming out of a farmer's mouth. We know we're an agricultural county, but we have to be careful that we don't unduly favor the agricultural sector at the expense of the rest of the county. And let's face it, these ditches, they affect the cities, they affect property owners in town as well. It isn't just our farmers. We gotta get this squared away so that, because otherwise we're not being fair to anybody. But we also have to do it right, because have we had the instance where we send out property statements after someone's bought a piece of property and they come back in and go, what the heck is this? When there's an assessment on there?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've encountered a couple of times this year. One was on Joint County Ditch 83 in Blue Earth, and it's a well-known owner that bought a piece of property that was in the Blue Earth JD 83 watershed, and when they purchased the property, all special assessments were to be paid. Now, that year that they bought the property, there was not an assessment placed upon GD 83. And so if, they were doing their due diligence and they called in and asked if there was any special assessments due to Joint County Ditch 83 or that particular parcel of property, if there was not an approved assessment for that year, then there is no assessment due, even though there is an assessment due, it just wasn't due that year. That property in particular owes about $10,000 towards G83, but the year that they bought it, there was no special assessment due for one-time, yearly annual assessment. So the answer was no, there are no special assessments due. But the answer should have been is that there is no special assessment due this year, but that parcel of property does have an obligation to X amount of dollars of debt that is owed in the system.
So how did that, okay, that system had debt but didn't get assessed?
Correct. I mean, we have lots of systems that have had debt that have not been getting assessed. And that is why we are where we are.
Let's move on to the next one, Chris.
Yeah, because the next scenario could look different.
Yeah, the next scenario, I mean, and the County Ditch 3 one that we gave you was pretty mild, pretty easy going. The next one is County Ditch 16. This is west of Waldorf. It's an all-tile system. It was established in 1921, and it's got about 23,000 feet of tile, which is 100 years old. We did a fairly large assessment to CD16 last year, 5%, which brought in $42,000. Anyway, the estimate of their cash balance with the second half taxes is $58,783. They have loans in the amount of $95,300. If we add an administrative cost of $1.40 an acre, it's $1,505. So they have a total of loans and administration with no repairs of $96,000. If we go and we take their cash balance with second half taxes against their loans that they have outstanding, that leaves us still at $38,000 in the red with a substantial assessment done in 2023. And what I want to stress to everyone is that this is a 100-year-old tile system that is probably, we can assume is probably failed. There's been reported incidents where there's problems with it, with suck holes and cracked tile. And so we have 23,000 feet of county tile out there that at some point, sooner than later, is going to need to be replaced. So some backstory on this one. In 2017, it needed a substantial repair down at the outlet with some tiles, and they spent about $83,000 doing those repairs, and the redetermination was also started in 2017. That redetermination, for whatever reason, did not get completed until November of 2022. So there were no assessments during that time period. And I went back and I looked in the records available to me, and that system had not had an assessment going back to 2010. So there's been no assessments in that system for 13 years. Now, what ends up happening where that hits home is for the example for that parcel ID that I gave you. Last year we did a 5% assessment to CD16. This year we're proposing 7, just trying to get that system out of the hole. But in 2017 at 5%, is it possible to pull up that parcel ID? Right? forgot to write down what his assessment was last year.
6,703.
6,703. So at 5% last year, he had $6,700 assessment on that 140 acres. Now this year, if we go to 7%, he has about a $9,400 assessment on 160 acres. And that is just to get their loans cleaned up and get a marginal amount in the maintenance and repair fund.
So is that one that you could just target zero instead of targeting, trying to get 20,000 in there at the end of the year?
We can target for zero, but
For the ones that have a negative balance, we just are trying to work to get them to zero.
yes, but then the question begs is that, and this is debatable, but if we target for zero, clean up their debt, and we do that for year 2024. In the year 2024, we have another catastrophic failure. We spend $50,000 in CD16. Technically, that puts us back in debt that we cannot assess until 2025. And so then technically those debts that are paid in 2024, if we're following our protocol for drainage liens, then that immediately means that those properties go back into a lien situation.
My comeback to that would be next year, we shouldn't have a 50% increase in our taxable values. So it would be easier to assess more next year than it will be this year. It's just my.
And that's what we're here today to discuss. You know, I mean, if the consensus of the board is that we have ditches that we can just target to get back to positive fund balance, you know, we're happy to accommodate. And
Yeah, part of this is you're trying to undo 20 years of problems in a year or two, which doesn't always work. Get that. So it's just trying to find the balance. So they're making forward progress. We're being realistic with the dollars that have actually been spent and statutorily we're supposed to be collecting, and making sure that the property owners and purchasers are both protected in that process at the same time. So this was a non-homestead parcel, so it's 1% of 0.5%, so it's a little bit more stark, you can see in terms of increase. So this would have been the 2023 county tax plus
The
special assessment. Good to know. Versus 2024 county tax plus special assessment.
Okay, that's both in there.
That's both tax and special assessment.
So it's a $3,500 increase on 160 acres.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
May I? This is exactly why we are where we are. We looked at that, and $6,000, you can't afford $6,000, and then it didn't get assessed at that. But the ones that didn't get assessed for like 10 years, anytime there was, oh, we need to redetermine that so it's more evenly spread and then go through the process, and it takes many years to get there. We didn't assess when anything, a project or a redetermination was going on, because the philosophy from the prior attorney was to wait until the end when it was more evenly distributed, because maybe only you three were paying on it when Dee was really benefiting a lot, and now she's in it. Those are the two things that got us into this situation.
Yeah,
It's
and I thought of that
50
afterward.
years of that.
That 83 could have been that situation where it was either in hold on a redetermination or in hold on a project.
Letting go for a lot of things, or a crazy election year, and we just couldn't do them all. I mean, there's so many things that went into it. It isn't that we didn't care, or we didn't try, or we weren't doing our job. We just
Right.
didn't have resources,
Uh,
and the philosophy was so different.
And us getting more aggressive here with getting these redeterminations.
And as to Tammy's point, as you've heard, even from Baker Tilly, this is not uncommon across counties. There are very few counties that I would say are following the letter of the law from a statutory standpoint, very few. So it's not as though Waseca County is this outlier, we're not at all. We're trying to get it cleaned up because we should, but it's not as though this is an uncommon practice. And this is a practice that is handled 87 different ways. Well, not every county has ditches. For the ones that do, everyone has a unique approach. And so, yeah.
And my concern is that, that taking care of it in a timely manner, because we all know that these systems have physical needs that are needed and due a year ago or next week. If all the systems were maintained and then proper operating order, the worry wouldn't be either that, we're spreading out the debt over a number of years and we are not collecting for future needs and repairs.
But I'm glad Tammy mentioned that as well too. I don't necessarily care about all of the historical narrative there, so I'm not blaming anyone, pointing fingers at anyone. There are so many different factors that went into all of this that it's which is why I say it's irrelevant. You may not feel it is, and that's perfectly fine. But as far as the historical narrative there, administratively, it's irrelevant to my mind. It's just, how do we approach it going forward? What's the best approach? 100% right that Egg Valley, I guarantee you Egg Valley's not going to do the same thing next year. But what's the most comfortable approach to get us back where we want to be? And ultimately, it's your perspective that's most important with where we want to be, when, where, and how we approach this, because there's been so many different commissioners' input that's gone into this to create the scenario we're in today. That, it's just this board, this group right now, collectively designing what makes the most sense for the constituency at large, given all of the factors we're talking about, the egg values themselves being obviously an important one, to put ourselves in the best fiscal position going forward. And the biggest piece is just plan, not looking at it kind of from the shotgun approach of the past of saying, well, that number's too big, we're not talking about this. Let's talk about it just in a more intuitive format then. So the biggest piece, the takeaway is to have a plan coming out of this, and if that plan is, let's eradicate everything we can next year. Let's kind of take that avalanche approach to debt and pick off all of the ones we can, and then next year we work our way further down the list, and in 2-3 years we're done. It's a very tenable approach. It's possible, and if it's 4 years or 5 years, that's still a tenable approach. It's possible. The biggest piece is it is a plan, and that's going to be the approach. Looking at this particular parcel again, it increases estimatedly $3,480, $3,480, of which $798.37 of that would be taxed specifically based upon that valuation change. And again, this was a non-homestead one. So 1%.
So obviously part of our discomfort in moving forward with this is that we've got this big value increase. So we know there will be some tax increase. But quite frankly, much of that is being mitigated by a 1.5 preliminary levy. The other part of this narrative is some of these ditches could see some darn big assessments. And people are gonna go, what the hey? I'm okay that we take a multi-year approach to this, as long as we can find some consensus around the fact that we should get this cleared up. And we're not doing we're not doing our constituents any favors by allowing this to continue, certainly. And I'm gonna go way past 30,000 feet. I'm gonna go up to 60,000 feet and say this. The little old ladies and the old people and the people we worry about the most, not just the mad farmer, but the folks that we worry about the most, like, oh, can I afford to keep this piece of property? If they can't afford to keep it, it rolls over into hopefully younger hands. And that's the economic churn too. We don't wanna be the cause of that, but we shouldn't necessarily keep that from happening either by our policies. As soon as we start looking at this on individual basis, who can afford this, who can't, we are taking normal economic churn away. And I don't know that that's a good idea either. At the same time, I sure don't want to be 80 years old and in the situation of saying, well, I'm going to have to sell the farm. You know, nobody wants to be there. But the fact is, I don't know that it's this board's job to keep that from happening. Families and people they need to pay their fair share.
If you thought about this in a multi-year, and because they caught up with agriculture this year, what would you do next year? Would you try and catch up on the ditches next year and on the following year put the lien against, or would you put the lien prior to trying to catch up? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, if you, what we're asking is if you got a ditch here that you think it's gonna take 5 years to get caught up.
Right.
Do we start putting the liens on now, or do you?
Try and catch up prior to. Do you assess for it the year and the year after put the lien on? Or I'd rather do that than hit someone with a lien going, I just got caught up on my assessment for ag land. Is it fair to?
With the right time.
Yeah, what is the right time?
I have some ambivalence. I could go either way on that. One of my questions would be for staff, can we even do that? How much work is in putting these liens on? How much are we gonna spend in hiring help to do that? Because then you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, too.
There's no way we would get liens on all of these properties by the end of the year. Anyway.
I would recommend incrementally doing it. We have a couple of them that are 10-year, like County Ditch 19 improvement, we're on the year 2 of 10 years. Maybe we start there, putting a lien on that one this year and get a process for how it works for this department and for the recorder. Try that one. I'm open to whichever way you want to try, and look at what you can do to clean up for next year and what's left, and make a decision how we do those. But I just don't, we can't just say, oh, put a lien on everything. That won't work.
Right, but what if you're going to have to notify the landowners. And what if you have someone that would come in and say, had a pretty good year. What's my number?
Absolutely.
And here we are.
Yeah.
So this is having to put it on the tax system so they can pay it off.
Yeah.
And that one is already on there as a 10-year. They could pay it off, yes. And some will.
So it's gonna be staffed by lobbies.
Well, that's why a lot of the counties aren't doing it this way, just because it's an enormous amount of administrative work. Because it's not just recording the liens, it's when they're paid off, you have to report the satisfaction to remove the lien as well. So every parcel you're committing to
Two processes.
But I totally agree, it makes sense to focus on the multi-year ones, and a lot of that ties back to the conversation the board is having last year, trying to avoid those multi-year ones. and extend and collect the costs when the maintenance is being done. And that's a conversation that is much, or maybe only possible when the ditch is caught up and there is some revenue there and ongoing maintenance revenue there. So the multi-year approach certainly makes sense if you have those 10-year systems. See what the balance is after it is collected now at the end of this next year and start there. If they're the 1 years, then we maybe not those 1 years turn in or reduce the cost or whatever the scenario.
Well, we've got 4, if I'm reading this right, we've got 4 ditches that are multi-year. One, 2, 3, 4, isn't there 4 altogether? Because 31's both the improvement and the,
There's a second page to that. Yep. So there's
Oh,
5.
you're saying 31's the improvement.
do you, I suppose you count each,
Oh, yeah,
I'm just looking at ditches, I'm not looking at the
Okay.
different parts of the ditches.
okay.
Because it's the same property owners regardless of whether it's an improvement
Right.
on grade maintenance.
Then this agreement.
I mean, CD19 has so few property owners. That's an easy place to start and say, those people need liens on their property.
And 2 of them didn't pay it off.
Then that's a super easy one to start.
Yes.
And I absolutely think that particularly those multi-year ones, and then we gotta figure out the balance for the ones, the other ones.
Can we go through the rest of these? Because they each got a little different scenario, so I kind of wanted to.
So the next one that you'll be looking at is on ditch 43, Tisco. And this particular ditch just finished up with redetermination this year. Has had some repairs done to it from years ago. It started a improvement petition, and the improvement petition kind of sat idle for many years and ended up being dismissed last year, and then after that, the redetermination was reignited and finished. And so this ditch has kind of sat idle without assessment for about a decade as well. And this year, when you look at your line 1, the estimate of cash balance with second half taxes, you'll notice immediately that that number is negative $43,513. That is because the cost of the redetermination, the buffer strip damages, the additional right-of-way, all of those expenses have been paid. So their fund balance is negative as of today. So they have a negative fund balance. They have loans in the amount of $51,493. There is some maintenance that is needed on that ditch to the tune of $11,000. And if we add on administrative costs, we have another $1,828, which brings them to a total for the loans and costs for year 2024 of $107,834. We're trying to keep in mind how this affects individual landowners to a certain extent, and I know that that is not the right approach, but we also have to bear in mind what is bearable. we are proposing a 4% assessment, which would bring in $61,500 for year 2024. So the way that, if you grant the assessment of 4%, that means that next year we still have another $43,000 to collect just to get it back to zero. So this is already a multi-year assessment that has gone on for a long time. So with the parcel that we were,
Yeah, so that was gonna be my question. I mean, at the end of the year, if you do a 4%, we're still gonna have a negative balance, but we just have it down as 1 year. On this 1 year, it just says 1 year, when really it's more than 1 year, because we're not cleaning it up.
that's correct. I mean,
So it really is a multi-year.
Well, it is the decision of the board, technically, that should be cleaned up in 1 year, the whole 107,800.
But what I'm getting at, when we were talking about earlier, as far as you were wondering how many multi-year ones we have, some of these that say 1 year, it doesn't mean that it's gonna be debt-free after 1 year.
No, on this sheet, it only shows the ones that we have really agreed are multi-year, not the ones that should be multi-year.
Right.
Just the ones we've really said, this is a multi-year and here's how we're gonna do
Well,
it.
the multi-years are already in the system, they're not being assessed, they're already.
With the exception of County Ditch 30. County Ditch 31 has to be discussed because County Ditch 31 just last year got done with a 7-year long-term assessment, and the numbers that are in County Ditch 31 are proposed this year for another long-term assessment. So we can get to that soon enough, but the County Ditch 19 improvement, the other long-term assessments, those are prior board approved, so those are set. They're just on that sheet for informational purposes. But, answering your question, Commissioner Christopherson, you're correct that this could be a multi-year assessment, but we're just demonstrating what happens if we assess for a portion of it and still have a negative balance at year end. And then it will be up to the board to decide, if we want to make it, for year 2024 and 2025, or if we want to extend it further. You can look at it in terms of how it affects that specific parcel of property.
Chris, one more.
Yeah.
So can you, in this 43 scenario, in this landowner scenario, can you dial that back up, Michael? What is it?
The difference?
The per acre cost of this 4% assessment? 4% assessment's gonna bring in 61,000. Do you recall off the top of your head how many acres it is?
It's 112, for lack of better terms, 180.
Yeah, 180, but how much in the whole system?
Oh, the whole system, 1,306 acres.
It's on the top of your sheet.
So you're assessing, that 4% is $47 an acre.
If you break it out as a whole, an average, but we're very careful to do that because the outliers, may only be $5 an acre, and some of the people directly in the ditch may have acres that are $60, $70, $80 per acre. So when we generalize a value against total acres in the watershed, that is it's a guidance tool, but it's very inaccurate. Now, if we go back, is that the 2023? Now, there's a very small assessment on that parcel for 2023 because we did do a 20% assessment to County Ditch 43 last year because the benefits were so small that we just did the maximum assessment for it. So in 2023, we did a 20% assessment, which netted just short of $8,000. So
20% assessment was 8,000. Now you're doing a 4%, you have 69,000.
but in 2023, the benefits were $40,000 of benefits, and now the benefits were $1.5 million.
And this is one of those parcel scenarios where it tends to be a little more soul crushing. Right?
Yeah.
Because you have a $10,000 increase essentially from the fixed amount.
Just because you're right on top of the tile or the ditch, you're getting hammered.
Yeah, and this one, like you say, hadn't been assessed for 10 years.
Correct.
So it had to build up, and redetermining it all kind of a perfect storm on this.
And that's why it's kind of a fallacy to talk about one-year projects now when there are negative balances and cleanup that has to happen. If you haven't been doing ongoing, regular assessment maintenance, then we almost have no one-year projects. We're not ever collecting the costs as they're being incurred. There's always more costs to be collected than the work that's being done right now. Do need to cut this off. Certainly come back again and chat through it further. But you got a bunch of information in front of you that you can take back with you and digest a little bit and look to the board's recommendation and the chair's recommendation for reconvening additional work sessions on this topic.
Any thoughts from the board?
Do you think that, was this helpful for staff, this, what you got from us today? I mean, and moving forward on some of these,
It's my,
establishing some multi-year and possibly doing some liens on some eventually and that type of thing?
yeah, we can go back to the drawing board and we can maybe come back with a list of ditches that we feel that we can clean up some of the dead end at the end of 2023. Propose, some multi-year assessments on some of these other ditch systems.
The one, that like ditch 16, I guess, it was the one that stuck out on me. It's a, if you target it as zero balance instead, then you could assess basically the same as last year. You had 5% on it last year, you went up to 700 to get that balance you'd like to see. That is one that I would, personally, I would say, could we leave it at 5 this year because of the extra cost going in with our with our values.
Yes, and we have no problem in looking at those scenarios and doing that. What our goal as staff is that, trying to avoid coming in at year end and, creating a bunch of added loans at the end of the year. And, that if we're following the statute and we're applying liens and we're applying new loans at the end of each year, technically we're supposed to be applying liens as well. That is our goal, is to try and work out of that scenario, but we understand the circumstances and we will work towards that.
Yeah, good. Chris. Danny. Work session adjourned 9:25. You know, all right, we'll call the Board of Commissioners meeting to order at 9:31. Silence your cell phones and to the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. If you have not signed in, please do so at the podium by the door. Is anyone here for public comment? Anyone for public comment? Anyone for public comment? All right, moving on to number 2, approval of the agenda. Commissioner Walter, do you have anything to add?
Other than the fact that I will be leaving at shortly after 10:30 to go ditch digging down in Fremont County. So
We'll try and have it wrapped up by then.
No, sir.
Commissioner Cosy,
No, Mr. Chair.
Michael,
No, sir.
Beth? All right, with that being said, I look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
And the second.
Motion by Commissioner Walters, second by Commissioner Krause. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Number 3 is approval of the county board minutes. I'm not going to read A through G. If everyone's had a chance to read them, I would look for a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, can I make a couple of quick amendments to these? For a conversation I had with Commissioner Christopherson for the work session minutes on August 21st at 30. I have amended those slightly just to allude to what specific articles were discussed in the UBC at that point in time. So I do have copies of them if you'd like to see them, but just simply adding the language that Articles 1 and 2 were discussed in the 21st meeting. Recommended changes were presented and ultimately leading to what will be a draft accumulation. Sorry, so getting through 3.01 and 3.07 on the 30th as well too. So those are just a couple of suggestions I have for additions to what was already there for August 21st and 30th. So the board would be willing to adopt those amended changes to those work session minutes.
All right, with that being said, we look for a motion with the amendment.
I will move, we accept that with the amendments.
We have a
As a
motion.
slate.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Christopherson, second by Commissioner Krause. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 4 is the consent agenda. Approval of the bills, fund transfer from Fund 19, fund transfer from Fund 13, transfer of developmental right for Marcella Arnetti. Partial release of exclusive agricultural use zone registered restrictive covenant for Carl A. Youngberg Testamentary Trust and PTO donation. Consent agenda. Looking for a motion.
I would move the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Number 5 are action items. A is the 2022 audit presentation from Baker Tilly. Good morning. Welcome.
Yes, I'm Amanda Mboga, and Katie Sam with me as well. And we're here today to go over the highlights from the 2022 audit. We did issue 3 reports as part of the audit. We have the financial statements themselves, the report on federal awards, and then a reporting and insights document. So we won't make you look through all those reports. I kind of summary put here together instead, as well as a handout at the end that covers some of the benchmarking and trend data. So we'll start out. We have the overview, kind of the agenda for what we'll cover. And we'll start out with the scope and status of services. So the audit of the financial statements has been finalized. Final reports are issued, and the county is working on the upload to the state auditor's office for their information. The audit of the federal awards is also complete and issued. That's the one, you don't have that every year. It depends on how much federal funding you have, but you're over the threshold for 2022. So the one major program that we had this year was the highway planning and construction program, and we had no findings related to that. The audit of compliance with state statutes that's rolled into that report on federal awards, and we had no findings in that area. Great, required audit communications. So all this information is from the reporting and insights document. That's largely required communications, things that we have to let you know about as part of the audit process. So I'll try to go through it relatively quickly. It's pretty similar to how it has been in previous years. Responsibilities, it goes through our responsibilities as your independent auditors. The audit status, there was no changes to the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. Under approach and results, findings are similar to the prior year, which are local, common for local governments of your size. There were the two internal control issues that were noted, as have been in previous years for the internal control environment, like lack of segregation duties, and the fact that the auditors are preparing the financial statements. Anytime we have that, we have to report that as well. Accounting policies, there were no changes in that area this year. GASB 87 for leases was effective for the year, and we did spend quite a bit of time evaluating that, but in the end determined it was not material, so it did not have to change anything in the financial statements for this year. Anyway, we'll continue to look at that annually going forward to make sure nothing has changed there. Accounting estimates, again, these are the same as they have been. We have the net pension liability, which relates to your portion of the CARA liabilities. Other post-employment benefits and depreciation of capital assets. Financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We had no significant unusual transactions, no difficulties, no disagreements with management to report. The audit report is not modified from the standard report. No consultations outside the engagement team to report. Audit adjustments, so we have two attachments as part of the document. The uncorrected financial statement statements are items that are not reflected in the financial statements. They're not material, so that's okay to do that. They're just not also at the level that we would consider trivial. So when they're kind of in between like that, we just have to disclose to you the impact of those items. We also have attached a complete list of the audit adjustments. No other audit findings or issues to report, and no management consultations with other accountants that we're aware of. The management representation letter is also attached in that document. That's a letter that we request from management at the end of the audit, just confirming that all information has been provided to us. They're not aware of anything that should be different in the financial statements, that kind of thing. Okay, excellent. Compliance with laws and regulations, we have reference to note 2 there. We did not have any findings to report in accordance with the government auditing standards. No known or suspected fraud identified, no going concern matters identified either. For group audit considerations, you do have a couple of entities where you, if they're joint ventures, where you do have an equity interest, and so those figures are rolled into your financial statements, your government-wide financial statements that we'll talk about in a bit. So those numbers are based on audits performed by other audit firms. Independence, no issues there to report, and no unusual related party transactions either. Other matters goes through our procedures for the required supplementary information and supplementary information that's part of the financial statements. And then the non-test services that we provide, again, same as they have been in previous years. We have the financial statement preparation, audit adjustments, and then the schedule of expenditures of federal awards we put together, as well as the related part 2 of the data collection form. All right, other management letter points. So these are kind of more of our optional points that we have included. Other comments and recommendations. We have decentralized cash collections. Again, that's been a kind of an informational point that's been in there. Just an annual reminder on those. County board resources, we have a link in there to our website where we have resources that are specifically designed for governing bodies. So not so much the technical accounting stuff that's for management, but more for the governing bodies. Accounting changes, we have a future accounting standards update. GASB continues to be busy issuing new statements for us to deal with. So the two that will be effective for next year that will need to be evaluated are the subscription-based IT arrangements and the public-private, public-public partnerships. And the very last section in that document is a two-way communication section. That's more future-looking. So under the standards, we do have to issue some planning communications. And so rather than issuing a whole separate document for that, we've chosen to roll that into this communication. So there are some questions in there. If you ever did have any concerns or anything that you just think we need to be aware of as we're going through the audit, please do get a hold of us and let us know about those things. All right, we'll move on to the review of the financial statements. So I'll give you the kind of the lay of the land first for the report itself. Starting with the independent auditor's report. So the county did receive an unmodified opinion, or what we sometimes call a clean opinion. So that's the highest level that you can get from an audit. The objective of the audit is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Reasonable assurance is a high level of assurance, but not absolute. Required supplementary information, we have the management's discussion and analysis. That's a portion that's put together by your staff. It says unaudited. We do look through that and compare the numbers to the financials, so it's all tying out. Basic financial statements, the first two schedules are full accrual schedules. Government-wide, it's meant to be kind of a very high level and similar to how a business would report. So your long-term debt, your long-term capital assets, those are all reported on the balance sheet for those two statements. Following that, we have the modified accrual statements, and those are more what you would be used to looking at throughout the year when you're doing your budget and looking at reports throughout the year. It's the fun, kind of the fun basis of accounting. There's a couple of reconciliation schedules so you can see the differences between the two sets of statements. Internal service fund statements for your self-insurance activity, and fiduciary fund statements, which would be the money that you're holding for other parties. And lots of really good standard commitment disclosures. All right, following that, we have the required supplementary information. So that includes the budget to actual schedules for the general fund and your major special revenue funds. We also have the other post-employment benefit and pension schedules, and there are some footnotes that go along with those as well. Supplementary information, that includes a detailed budget to actual schedule for the general fund, as well as any budget schedules that were not included under the required section. Combining statements and schedules for your non-major governmental funds and your fiduciary funds. Those are just combined into one column on the front schedules, so if you want the detail. For those, you have to go to the back schedules. And a schedule of intergovernmental revenues. All right, so then we have a handout. Let me go to the next one, Michael, there you go. Okay, I'll turn it over to Katie to look at the highlights here.
Okay, so I'm going to dive a little bit kind of into the numbers and then a trend that the county has. So the first one, so one of the key metrics when you open up the financials to assess the health of an organization is that general fund balance. You can see that your fund balance is just about $9.5 million there. And then we take that and we split that into different buckets depending on how that can be spent. So you can see the categories we have up there. The first one is non-spendable. And as the name suggests, it's just not in spendable form. And this is due to legal or contractual requirements. So this is really made up of your prepaids and the long-term portion of advances to other funds. The next category is restricted, and the key with this is that it's coming from an external group. So common examples of people that will place this restriction: creditors, grantors, contributors, laws, and regulations, but that's from an outside party. The third category we have there is assigned, and this is your internal designations. So this is what the county has earmarked for specific purposes. And the final category is unassigned, and that's just kind of the catch-all. So any funds that you have that are not earmarked for another purpose end up in this bucket. So then you want to go down just a little bit. Yeah. So another thing that we'll look at is your available, which is that combination of your assigned and your unassigned balance, compared to the general fund expenditures. And what this is telling us is that this is how much reserves you would have if your revenue stream does not come in equally throughout the year. This is what you have on hand to meet those expenditures. So you can kind of see on the graph, we have your balance compared to some of the recommendations. So the GFOA recommends a minimum of 2 months on hand. You can see that the blue line is the county. You guys are well above that. And then we also have OSA's recommendation, and that's 5 months. You guys are currently in the general fund are sitting at just a little over 4.5 months. So pretty much right in line with those recommendations.
Can you tell us what those are, OSA?
The Office of the State Auditor.
Office of State Auditor.
Yes.
Okay. And then what's the other one? GFOA.
The Government Finance Officers Association.
Okay, thank you.
And they've kind of established this benchmark. The GFOA is really on that general fund level. OSA expands it to be for the general funds and the special revenue funds. So the numbers we have calculated at the bottom there is we look at the county, your general fund and your special revenue. And you guys have 67%, which equates to about 8 months on hand. And there's quite a range of all of the counties, and the average, you guys are above average in that calculation. So that is just kind of telling us that during times of uncertainty, the county is doing well, and that you probably will not need to borrow to fund your basic operations. So good ratio there. We go to the next page. Okay, and if we look at some of this stuff, your current year actual compared to your budget, and then also the prior year. So if we look at the general fund specifically, we can see that the revenue and other financing sources and your expenditures are up compared to 2021. And that you increased your fund balance by just over $600,000. A lot of the reason why it's up in 2022 is to support some building upgrades. We just had additional expenditures for the renovation, and then there was a transfer into the building fund to kind of support and cover the cost of those expenditures. The next section is cash, and you can see that your cash balance has increased, I believe, approximately $1.9 million compared to the prior year. So you guys have cash on hand to meet your current obligations. You have the flexibility to invest, and maybe earn some returns on that depending on the market. When we look at some other funds, your major special revenues, those are the ones that have the separate columns in the financial statements. Road and bridge, we can see is up about $511,000 compared to the prior year in fund balance. Kind of just depends on the grant funding that you had. You guys had the single audit this year for the major federal program, so that also played a part in there. For the ditch, the deficit decreased, so that's a positive thing. I believe it was about $218,000. And then the special revenue fund balance decreased by like $347,000. A lot of that kind of relates to the general fund. There was a transfer out of the special revenue planned expenditures to kind of cover the renovation. So not an area of concern there. A couple of the last things we look at are related to debt, which Amanda mentioned. It's just really reported on that government-wide, those first couple of schedules. So you can see that your outstanding debt plus the available amount has decreased. You guys didn't issue any new debt this past year, so we're seeing a decrease. And then we look at your debt capacity, which is based on 3% of the total taxable market value within the county. And then the percent of the debt limit used. So there's a couple variables. If you're issuing new debt, paying it off, kind of fluctuations in that market value. But you can see that you guys are well below the limit, which is what we want to see. So that's really good. And then the last graph we have here is debt service to non-capital expenditures. So the recommended max for this is about that 20%. You can see that the county, that blue line, is below 5%. So another thing that we like to see, and then when we look at that over the 3 years, it's pretty consistent. So you guys are not having to use that. So also positive. I think that might be the end of mine.
Yeah, so overall, things are looking pretty good. There's no major red flags or any issues that came up as part of the audit this year. And that's sort of what we have for the prepared content, but happy to take questions if anyone has.
Questions from the board?
I guess my only question would be is why, well, back to that OSA and GFO. You know, it's quite a difference. And is there quite a bit of difference between states on what they would recommend for funding?
Yeah, well, so GFOA is a national organization, so they're kind of broad, yeah, covering a broad range of organizations. And theirs, I would say, is kind of like bare bones minimum. You know, that's not what you want to shoot for. You want to be above that. Minnesota is specific to the counties and what they're recommending. The Office of the State Auditor is specific to Minnesota counties and what they're recommending there. So, which you're right in line with what they're saying. So it's not out of line with what the national recommendation is. It's just that theirs is as low as kind of a floor of where you would want to be. If we start seeing clients get down towards that level, we start getting a little concerned. So.
Yeah, and I was just wondering if, you know, the Iowa Office of State Auditors, I mean, around, are a lot of them right around that 40% or don't you know?
You know, that I don't know, and I don't know that all the states have a recommendation. I'm trying to think, I don't think Wisconsin does. I haven't heard of one that they recommend. So possibly, but.
Is that, in your auditing, is it, do you often see a total ditch balance in the deficit?
Yes. That's actually very common. And when you approve liens for the ditches, those don't necessarily flow in as revenue right away because they're going to be collected over a period of time in a lot of cases. So the numbers here do not reflect anything that is beyond 1 year for sure. I don't know if you remember any of those numbers off the top of your head, how much they might have in deferred. Might be about 2 million. That's classified as unavailable right now. It has not flowed into the fund balance numbers because it's going to be a longer term collection.
Is it quite often to have liens on ditches?
Yes. Yeah, and normally the expenses are on the front end and then they do the liens on them. And so it's very common that they have deficit balances.
Anyone else with a question? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Jim and Tammy, good job. forward. All right, B is cover crop cost share projects. Chris?
Good morning again. We have in front of you today our recommendations to use riparian funds to cover 4 individual contracts for cover crop practices located within Waseca County. All 4 of these contracts have been approved by SWC staff and entered into an agreement with the individual producers. All 4 projects fit the criteria of SWC guidance, and we're just asking for the approval of the contracts for planting.
All right.
If you would like, I can go through them individually if you're curious of their location or the producer. I just did not know if you had had a chance to look through them or if you had any questions.
Let's have a motion.
I will make that motion. I looked through them. They look good to me, so I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
There is a second.
Motion by Commissioner Krause, second by Commissioner Walter. Is there any discussion?
Sir? It's here. Is there any dollar figure? I don't see any dollar figure attached to this. Is there?
Well,
Each,
each contract has its own dollar figure, and I didn't put in a total summation, but the Hogan Farms contract was $2,564. The Colson contract,
and that, our fund balance is,
yes.
well, okay.
Other questions? No. All right, we have a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thanks, Chris. C is land and water resources equipment purchase.
As we've had some discussion in the past, Land and Water Resources has requested bids for a small excavator to use throughout the public drainage system, county-owned properties throughout Waseca County. We quoted 4 comparable brands of machines at the state bid price, and they ranged anywhere in price from $159,000 to over $190,000. We kind of, what is being suggested to you is a machine from Ziegler Caterpillar. Have a good working relationship with them, and they also came in as the low apparent bidder on the project. The discussion on this is that we had this budgeted for 2024, and we are looking to make a purchase before year end so that we can use it in some ongoing county projects such as the septic system and some maintenance out at Courthouse Park and other county properties before the end of the year.
All right, let's have a motion and a second and discussion.
I'll move it.
We have a motion by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion?
Can I just, oh, go ahead.
Just quick, this is a budgeted item, but it was budgeted for 24.
That is correct.
We have the cash flow to do it in 23. Is that where you're going?
That's where I was going.
There you go. I teed you up.
Appreciate that for the introduction. So the suggestion with this, in addition to what Chris is mentioning, is because we need to get some of these projects done this fall regardless, and the other option is to incur some cost to rent a machine that we're ultimately going to purchase in a couple of months. So it didn't seem real sensible to spend $5,000 at least a month to rent the same machine that we're budgeting for to be able to procure in a couple of months. So on my end, and for Tammy's end, it's going to be a journal entry consideration. I'm still going to recommend it covering the cost in the next fiscal year, but we are going to be able to cash flow the item in this time frame as well. So the budget for next year included a used dump truck, $190,000 that had been budgeted. With this in mind, and then a used dump truck as well. So it's still going to fall within that budgeted scenario that's currently built into the preliminary budget that was approved. Obviously, that number can still change, of course. Discussions can still be held there. The next cash flow implication is going to be an issue in this first period.
The machine is on the lot and all the attachments, or would you be waiting for anything?
The machine is on the lot, the attachments would be put on at a later date and time, so we could use the machine as it currently is to get our work done for the year. And then after year end, we would bring the machine back to Caterpillar to install the attachments that were included in that estimate.
Free delivery?
Of delivery. Yes.
We've got a trailer to haul this.
Correct. The trailer that we purchased earlier this year through the riparian fund is capable of transporting this piece of equipment.
Was there, one more. I think at the last meeting, we had some talk about talking with Public Works also as far as wanting the dump truck, right? Possibly a rollover there. And then is there, we don't have an excavator, right, at Public Works. Is this something that, I realize this is land and use resources machine, but can there be some coordination with this machine?
We are willing to work with Highway Public Works to try and help accommodate them if they have any needs, whether that be the use of that machine or the use of the machine with an operator, or we will try and do whatever we can to be accommodated.
Good. Anything else from the board? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you. D is the amended fiscal year 2024 Steel Waseca Drug Court Cooperative Agreement. Mr. Jonathan?
Commissioners. Recall us here about probably within the last month for the actual cooperative agreement for the judicial district drug courts. After that, there were some additional funds that the third judicial district had that they allocated towards our drug court, which was an additional $6,725, or I believe will be a total of $160,000. Fiscal year retroactive July 1st of this year through June 30th of 2023. So some additional funds that they allocated to our drug court. So just requesting a approval and signature of the amended contract.
Does we have a motion? So moved. Second? I'll second that. We have a motion by Commissioner Christopherson, second by Commissioner Krause. Any other discussion? Good news.
Yes.
All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. E, contract number 812310, final acceptance of payment for the Fuel Island decommissioning.
Good morning. I have a number of these final So this first one is for Fuel Island, old fuel station removed at the fairgrounds. Pumping Meter was our contractor, performed all the work. Final value certified is $57,887.57, which is under the original contract amount of $66,000 and change, primarily due to contingencies in that contract for removal of contaminated soils and input of clean soils. If it was necessary, that wasn't necessary. So the contract under Ryan, the final payment amount due to Pumping Meter is $2,894.38. Staff would recommend acceptance of the work and authorization of final payment.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Yeah, it's second.
Motion by Commissioner Multer, second by Commissioner Krause. Discussion? Go on to discussion. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. F is contract number 812207, final acceptance of payment, bridge L4117 replacement. And
So this is Janesville Township's bridge replacement that all of you saw on our road tour in August. Midwest Contracting was our contractor, did all the work according to specs. Value work certified is $479,638.71, which is just shy of the original contract amount of $481 and change. Final payment in the amount of $27,649.54 is due to Midwest. And then also in the packet I can outline the Janesville Township participation of $20,000, which they have paid, and the rest we will see from the town bridge account for construction and engineering costs. And, staff recommends acceptance of the work and authorization of final payment.
excellent. Looking for a motion.
I would like to move this.
Second? Second. Motion by Commissioner Multer, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any other discussion?
Just my very deepest thanks. Janesville Township has had much angst over this bridge for many, many years. And I don't know if it's gonna solve all the problems, but this was done right. And I know you put a lot of extra time into making this happen, so I really appreciate the efforts on your department.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. G is contract number 812306, final acceptance and payment for CASA 43 pavement rehabilitation.
This one is South 43 or Teal Street in Janesville. Pavement resurfacing and some drainage work performed by WW Blacktopping. All work has been completed. We did go slightly over the original contract value on this project. I have a typo in my summary there. It's 106% of the original contract amount. Work certified is $204,191.70. And primarily, this was due to a change order to work inside the CP rail right away. We're able to secure right of entry and do the mill and overlay work right up to the tracks. And the railroad has some fees incurred for that work to work within the right of way, plus just the extra quantities to do that work is why we went over the original contract amount. Final payment in the amount of $10,209.59 is due to WW Blacktopping. And then again, in your packet, I kind of outlined the costs share between the city of Janesville and Waseca County, which we will invoice them shortly after this board meeting. So staff recommends acceptance of the work and authorization of final payment.
All right, looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second. Motion by Commissioner Krause, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Discussion. There's no discussion. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. H is contract number 812311, final acceptance of payment for the solid waste driveway and parking lot improvements.
This work again was performed by WW Blacktopping, and again was on the tour. All work was completed in accordance with the plans and specs. Value work certified is $112,803.
101% of our original contract amount of $111,000 and change. Final payment in the amount of $6,223.45 is due to WW Blacktopping. And then this was a project program with our investment fund money in Fund 19, which transferred funds during the consent agenda this month. So, thank you. And we recommend acceptance of work and authorization by final payment.
Looking for a motion to accept.
Move acceptance.
Is there a second?
There it is.
Motion by Commissioner Christopherson, second by Commissioner Krause. Any discussion? There's no discussion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I is contract number 812308, final acceptance and payment for County Road 53 trail improvement.
So this was our trail overlay in Janesville as well. Nielsen Blacktopping performed this work. Let's see. We did eliminate the, and we talked about this on the road tour a little bit, we eliminated the seal coat that was in the original contract in agreement with the state of Janesville, which again, we had a cooperative agreement with them. So that reduced our final value to $100,291.32, which is only 72% of our original contract. Final payment in the amount of $5,598.09 is due to Nielsen Blacktopping. And then again, I have that breakdown in your packet for the cost share between the city and county. And we recommend acceptance of the work and authorization of final payment.
Is there a motion?
There is.
And is there a second?
There it is.
Motion by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Krause. Discussion.
Once that seal coat's done, then in 2 years, is it the same agreement,
Yeah.
same old percentage
We're
rate?
gonna have to craft another one, but that would be the intent.
Have to renegotiate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a consent agenda fund transfer was for this project here as well.
Commissioner Walter.
Once again, much thanks to our public works. Nothing has been done with this trail in many, many, many years. It was a hazard to residents who were using it. And I have just heard wonderful things from residents of Janesville. They are so excited to have a safe trail that they can easily use. And so this was a great project. It's good to keep our residents safe when they're going out to the park.
They can get their roller skates out now again?
They can even get their bikes out. I tell you what, I took my bike on that. It was,
From the bike.
oh my gosh, it was dangerous. It really was quite hazardous. It had so many cracks and it's just absolutely beautiful now.
True. Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. J is contract number 812313, award bridge number 81532, replacement on Cassatt 3.
Yeah, so we wrapped up all that work and then needed some more. So we advertised a bridge project on Cassatt 3 north of Waldorf. This is that tributary of Little Cobb River, just south of our Cassatt 4. We opened bids on September 21st. We received 3 bids. M&K Bridge Construction, which is out of Walnut Grove, Minnesota, is the apparent low bidder with a bid amount of $878,346.50, which is about 2.6% over our engineer's estimate. I've included a bid summary in your packet. There are local bridge replacement program grant funds for this, encumbered for this project, which is actually the next item. And that is about $365,900. The balance will be funded with county state highway construction dollars and the local option sales tax funds. And we plan to start construction in March of next year. So we recommend award to M&K.
All right, looking for a motion.
I will recommend low bidder, award low bidder.
Is there a second?
There it is.
Motion by Commissioner Christopherson, second by Commissioner Krause. Discussion.
You said construction would start in March?
That's the intent, kind of get so complete by early June, so we can hopefully tackle the next bridge a mile and a half north of here.
So there would be rerouting the traffic around,
Correct. So it would be, the detour would be 74 in Waldorf East to 11 and then back on 4 around that bridge site. Yep, all paved roads.
Okay.
All paved.
So, yeah, because our intent is also to resurface 33.
Which will be the detour for the next bridge. So that work will be ongoing while this one is probably being wrapped up if stars align, weather permits.
Okay, so this detour for this bridge
It's not
doesn't interfere with that.
Any other discussion?
we kind of have the same question. It's got there.
All right, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, that motion carries. The next one, 9K, would be the resolution 2023-35 for the MnDOT agreement for number 1054440 for local bridge replacement program grant. Good?
Good job.
There you go.
So this is the grant agreement for the $915 to fund bridge eligible costs for the bridge contract you just awarded. Standard agreement requires a resolution. The resolution authorizes the county board chair and the county administrator to execute the grant agreement. Staff would recommend you use it.
I would move resolution 2023-35.
We have a motion, is there a second?
There is.
Motion by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion? There's no discussion. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for keeping up with it.
No, we're still paying them, come on.
No, just for board.
Probably not. Next time.
All right, I is the sheriff's office proposed snowmobile upgrade. Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, proposed snowmobile upgrade, 2 snowmobiles and a trailer to haul those mentioned snowmobiles to replace our existing fleet that's 20 and 21 years old. Technology has greatly changed. These are designed for rescue operations and they're needed. The old sleds need some maintenance to them as well that would cost more than the actual value of the snowmobiles themselves. And so in addition, the trailer is needed to haul the new sleds because they're a tad bit bigger as in a longer sled or track. So the enclosed trailer is needed as well to haul them. The existing sled package that we have from 2003, 2004, those snowmobiles would be sold and that money would be put back into the budget. So, and we would sell those online to Minbid and either sell them individually or as a package deal, whatever would bring the most money to get back. So we're looking at, we have a quote, proposed quote that's listed for $39,866.46. And so that our staff and myself proposed to, there's money in the budget for these sleds in the vehicle fund. There's money there for it. And so I propose that we purchase the two snowmobiles and a trailer with money out of the vehicle fund.
Looking for a motion.
I would move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Krause, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Discussion.
Remind me again, I know we had this on work session item too, but how many calls a year do you think? How many miles do these sleds get a year?
So it varies from year to year based on the snow amounts that we get and the staff that's available to operate them. But there's not only rescue calls, there's snowmobile enforcement, sheriff's office is responsible to go out and to enforce the laws on the trails in the county. So I don't have the statistics on how many rescue calls or miles that are put on or staff time, because it is weather dependent and it changes year to year. But like a lot of our equipment that we have in the sheriff's office, we need to use the equipment. We need to have working equipment that's user friendly to our staff and that's reliable to start to get out there and to do the enforcement and to do the rescue when someone's in need.
And you do go out on our local county lakes.
Correct.
And hit the fish shacks.
Yes, we do use them for not only trail enforcement, but also on the lakes for enforcing and maintaining law when there's fish houses out on Clear Lakes, St. Olaf Lake, Reed's Lake, wherever it may be. So they're used often. And this is something that would last a long time within the sheriff's office, being maintained.
Yeah, that is a long time. I mean, 20 years. Right?
And technology has greatly changed since 20 years ago. So
do you think that are these 03s carbureted?
They are carbureted.
No, this will be fuel.
These are EFI, electronic fuel injected. So that's part of the problem, is they're difficult to get started to maintain.
Right.
They're not properly stored or ran, and they get toned up with typical carbureted engines.
Right.
So this is would be a great improvement to what we have, and it is a needed equipment to perform rescue operations in a time of emergency.
Any questions? All right, we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. M is the resolution 2023-36 for the South Central Drug Investigation Unit Joint Powers Agreement.
So with that, my understanding in the reading through the South Central Drug Investigation Unit, this is the same contract that's been in existence in previous years. With a new year, the current contract was expired, and with new leadership in different agencies, they needed a updated agreement that was signed by all new leaders and just to have it current. So I don't believe there was any changes to it. And it was also shared with our county attorney, and she's aware of the agreement as well. So I would make a motion, or I am support of. I'm listening to you guys too much. I support this agreement, this joint powers agreement to be signed, and I see no changes with the signature of it.
Okay. Looking for a motion. And is there a second? There is. Motion by Commissioner Malter, second by Commissioner Krause. Discussion.
Chair.
Yes.
Is there to your comment, how often does this joint powers agreement get revived or renewed or re-signed? Anytime there is any change in membership or representation? I mean, obviously, Waseca County has a new sheriff this year, and that makes sense. Do we go back and do this every time one of those participating entities has new leadership, or is there particular routine?
I don't have the knowledge to answer that. This is the first time it's been presented to me. I know our county attorney sits on the joint powers agreement or joint powers board, and she may be able to add some information to that.
So it's not so much that it expires, but we wanted to have an updated agreement just because there was a whole bunch of new Cleos this year. So we wanted to have an updated one, make sure everyone's all on the same page. The actual contents are exactly the same as the last JPA. And to ask if every time a new Clio comes in, do they sign it? No, it's just it had been a long time. And looking at who had signed the previous ones, I don't know that hardly anybody was even the same people anymore.
Sheriff, you probably told me, maybe I wasn't listening, but the members of the agreement shall consist of the following government units. Does everybody pay in to each one of those governing units? Pay a portion,
Yes, there's a portion that's paid in.
depending on their size and how much they use it?
I believe it's based on their size.
Any other discussion?
One more question. Speaking of that, which leads me to say there must be some bylaws that go along with this agreement that stipulate cost per entity and those formulas, I'm assuming. And we had no concerns with those bylaws either.
Correct. None of that has changed from previous contracts.
They have, a few years ago, the prices increased per everyone just because of lots of other costs, I think, included. But it was all agreed upon.
And then, so I would imagine, I think I know the answer, is there one representative from each entity on
Yes,
board?
yep.
Okay.
And every other month,
Every other one.
there is board meetings that usually relate to either happen in Elberly or you can sign on online via Zoom and participate in the board meetings.
Okay.
So everybody's kept up to date or in the loop of what's happening and changes that need to be made or activity of the group.
Is that sent out to us or could it be? Just for us to,
The minutes or the agenda or what?
the Zoom, if I wanted to sit in and just listen to it.
Yes and no. There's a part of the session that's closed,
Okay.
so you wouldn't be allowed to attend that portion. So I guess, yes, let us know if you want to attend. It's the second Tuesday every other month. And then we can get you the Zoom link.
It would just be for the knowledge, you know,
Yeah.
just understand
What goes on.
on.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And otherwise, like the minutes are public too, and we can share those too if you want to ever read any. I have all of them.
Yeah, that would be quite helpful too, just to read through minutes would be as good. Okay, thank you.
Could be. Now, is there a chair?
Yeah.
Person, or does that change, or does that person just stays on in that chair spot, and who is it now?
It's JD Carlson from Albert Lee, right now. He's the director of public safety down there. It was Keith Hiller for many years, and then he retired, and then it went to JD. So then I don't know so much that there's a term. I haven't ever seen anything that says there's a term, but I suppose it's.
As long as things are working efficiently and there's no concerns, my understanding is they're just allowed to continue in that role. Unless
So
there's
it's just a regular agenda, and if there's anything on the agenda for that meeting, then you go through it and you're done.
Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. N is the call handling system, the telephone system, and our dispatch communications center.
So this is kind of the hub of our operations. This is where all the calls come into the dispatch center. Our current system is the Viper system that's manufactured by Entrado. The system is 8 years old, and it's beyond its expected life. It's old technology that has needed to be updated. The manufacturer or the people that service it are based out of Canada, and so when we have breakdowns, there's always a delay in getting service, and some of the parts are no longer supported, and if they are supported, there's a delay in getting them. But it is an outdated system, so after some extensive research and conversations with some providers and agencies around us, we did kind of two providers are Entrado, which is the current system we have, but there's only 2 counties that are using that. I think it's Olmsted County and Malvern County. The other system is Vesta, which is by Motorola, and that's what's being used by 50+ agencies in the state of Minnesota. And it's also being utilized by Blue Earth County, which is who we have a co-op agreement with, so that if something happens in Waseca County, we can flip a switch and send our staff over to Blue Earth County to keep telephone communications operational here in Waseca County, or vice versa, Blue Earth County can come to Waseca County.
Thank you, Dee, for doing this for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to duck out.
So Vesta seems to be the preferred vendor to go with. And on top of that, an additional thing is that it's also, with the research done, it's actually, it appears to be cheaper than the Entrado that we quoted. So the Vesta system at a 5-year cost is $177,117. Another perk of having with the Vesta system is there's minimal hardware in Waseca County. It's more of you're paying for the service versus the hardware. And so with so many other agencies using it, that you get service and keep it up and running and update it with the refreshes, it's the program to go with. So as mentioned, the 5-year cost is $177,117 compared to Entrado, which is significantly more at over $218,000. So we recommend, staff recommends going with the Vesta system. One thing with that is this price is only good until Friday, October 6th. Otherwise the price goes up. And we also, in addition to taking action on the price, we also need to take action because once we place the order, it needs to, there's some turnaround to get the service installed. And they're looking at next spring for the Vesta system to be installed, March or April timeframe, which is important as their current system service agreement expires in May of 2024. So timing is spot on to work efficiently, to be installed when their other contract for Entrado expires.
So staff recommends
going with the Vesta system for $177,117 for a 5-year cost. And if we pay the total payment, we actually get a discount. I think I wrote it down for $169,917 if you pay it, and there is money available that's been budgeted in the public safety aid money. And it was previously discussed in previous work session.
Preliminary budget has $178,396 approved for this.
176, so
178,796.
oh, sorry.
let's get a motion in a second.
Yeah, I'll move approval of this new system.
Is there a second?
Yep.
Motion by Commissioner Christopher, second by Commissioner Cook. Now discussion.
See what was I gonna ask now? See, I forget my words when you get up.
So, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Oh, I know.
so just, before you forget.
Are you sure? So are you planning, we'll take the discount and pay it all up front?
That's what I was hearing as the recommendation, yes. And Sheriff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we'll actually realize the cost until the equipment is here.
Correct.
So this is committing to the order, letter of commitment essentially, so we can get the quoted price and it does not increase, but we won't actually realize this cost until fiscal year 2024. And in the budget framework right now, for fiscal year 24 is $178,396 for this project. So realizing that we'll get it for a little cheaper than that, 169.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get on this and get it ordered. What you said on the 6th.
Correct, Friday, this Friday, the 6th.
And as long as they get the new ones and the service and everything before the old contract lines up.
And it shouldn't be any delay in the service. They'll be able to put the system in, have it operational when they cut ties to the existing system.
But there's no delay with the equipment.
And so that,
That's
Right, because you said the contract was year by year.
correct, our current service agreement with Entrado is year by year, so we will just try to solidify that when we make the final agreement with Vesta, this new system Vesta, is try to verify that there will be no delay. And if there is, we'll work out an agreement for that. So at this time, there should be no delay. There's no known delays to be expected.
And what we delved into a little bit more in work session, Vesta is owned by Motorola company, correct? Which is also the parent company of the handhelds that we have budgeted for in 2024 as well. So there's some synergy there between the hosted solution that dispatch will be using, which was important that the sheriff pointed out as well too. It's not as much physical infrastructure for us, they're hosting the solution, but also that solution is the same company for the newly encrypted and updated radios. And so we'll be pursuing as well.
Other comments, questions? We do have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right, on to administration. The update, Mike, with our 20 minutes.
I appreciate that. I'll be brief. I just want to remind you quickly that the 17th, we plan on having the BKB group coming in and give a work session, presentation, same time, clock. That's going to jump out and down there. And go over the most updated concept and strategic design that they have put together for us. Next week, we plan on facilitating a subcommittee conversation to look at that same 17th presentation. So we'll be trying to corral Commissioner Harvey and Walter as they have time. Once I know what that final date is, will be. And then November 7th, regular meeting. We will have Bill Eccles come back to us and give the final presentation, final submittal cost estimate for the what will be the application to the board and board fund. We expected that funding, that notice of funding opportunity to be released on the 9th of October. And that is when we will see the final kind of program requirements, eligibility constraints, funding mechanisms for this iteration of board of board. It's been most rumored by Office of Broadband Development recently that they're going to do one larger competitive pool instead of two smaller. I mean, it's essentially two $50 million opportunities or $100 million opportunity. So lots of good feedback we've had on this project outlook, feeling very confident in its arrangement as well. I did send out a notification to you folks about securing some letters of support from constituents and community members, business owners, operators, teleworkers, et cetera, in the project area as well. I've connected with all of the townships as well in that area and have been getting resolutions and support from them, as well as the cities adjacent or in that area. So if there are specific names that you can come up with, and as well as I would ask your consideration for individual support from the commissioners as well. But I'd like to execute those in the month of October if possible, so by the end of the month, if we're able to amass as many as we can, that would be great. We'll still have some time into November, of course, but just to put a date to it. Yes, sir.
That list that you sent out to us, are those all ones that we want to get letters, or is that ones you're going to contact and got letters, or have letters already?
I think I have arrangements for all of the names that I sent you already. Either they've been received or they've been contacted.
Okay.
Except for, and I was actually talking to you about, Christopherson. I don't have the name in front of my brain, but I can quickly reference it.
Are you looking at that list?
I'm attempting to, yes.
I'm trying to recall which one. Like Scott Rao, Peter Fleming, Mac was great.
No, it wasn't the township, it was another.
Greg Wrestler.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that sounds right. Because I think he's the one I talked to you, he's just down half a mile from where they quit their last project.
Okay.
And he tried to get them to come to his place when they were doing that project.
Okay.
They couldn't get done. Now, Steve, supposedly, I gave Steve the contact information. And he was going to talk to him. I don't know if he has yet.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and Steve has it, then we'll be covered there.
Okay.
I just met with Steve for quite a while the end of last week and updated on all of this and went through that list. I'm connecting with all the legislative delegates and I drafted resolutions for all the townships and some of those. The returning those in their October meetings. Trying to get you there. But Bill will be back November 7th. That's the plan as of now. That won't be the work session. That'll just be a presentation actually in the actual board meeting. And that will be the date that he is looking for a letter of commitment essentially from the county for what the designated cost would be. So he'll have final construction estimates and totals by then. And just pausing on that until we know, which should be next week with the actual eligibility requirements on it.
And that money commitment will be due at beginning of construction, end of
Not
construction?
until 2026.
Okay, and that, right now, you would earmark that getting paid through just general fund, or?
Nope, it already
Or
has
that'd be
its
our
own
budget,
designation, yeah.
That's our one.
So special revenue fund dollars.
Haven't gotten much sleep the last few nights.
So that cost has already been committed at a high level from the board, just in previous conversations. Obviously, we don't have ARPA dollars at this point. It's just reserve, special reserve. And I only give that distinction because there was the federal amendment earlier this year in March that holds back all ARPA dollars that are unspent by the end of this year. So from our standpoint, we don't have ARPA dollars. Sure, all the federal dollars that have been allocated in counterfactual revenue loss. Just reserve dollars, been broadband on that.
Okay.
Good question. Anything else on that project? Or any project really? I will be visiting with the political science class on October 11th at the Waseca High School and kind of giving a presentation on what a county commissioner is, what they have to think through, what they have to deal with, what they have to handle. That's going to come take notes, apparently.
Maybe we should do
Oh,
that.
You know, we should do this, especially for the commissioner.
I'll bring snacks, that'll be exciting. Well, they're excited about it. So.
Excited?
And there are seniors and there are also some MSU students as well too. So post-secondary as well. So I will be doing that class Wednesday afternoon, and then that's intended to be a precursor to the high school hosting and inviting current commissioner candidates to a coffee and conversations question, a forum. It's not really, we're not really calling it a debate per se. That's just the name we tend to subscribe to. But forum, the end of October, that will invite the three commissioner candidates to. And those will be questions that are graded by the class themselves based upon what they hear from me in that conversation, and then take a couple of weeks as a class and develop those questions and conversations for the commissioner candidates. So that will be something that's live streamed, available, and I'm sure has some media coverage, and open to the general public for attendance as well. And the evening of the 11th, 6 to 8 or 8:30, you'll be doing a presentation to the whole RMDC, or Regional Development Commission in the state in Mankato, with Christian Brecken and Jason Bruns, focusing on the Workforce Development Center project and the tie-in to America's Cutting Edge program, which would be the lower level community services building. Let's develop those finalized plans and strategic design concepts by the last week for that. So with Seth did a tremendous job in meeting pretty extraordinary demands and deadlines, getting that turned around. So I'm appreciative of that. Their commitment to getting that done and then sticking with it. So anyway, we'll be giving a presentation that Wednesday evening as well too, in Mankato on that, which will be interesting. It was very well received from the NATO group when we did the presentation to them a few weeks ago. That was the first time the national designation, the national organization for the development groups officers have been in our region. So we gave that presentation to 35 or 40 people. It was very well received, and they recommended it to be given at this State Development Commission as well. Just if you're wondering where I am on any of those days, that's where I'll be. And any other questions or updates or anything forward?
No, I already forgot what I was going to ask.
Keep doing that to you guys.
Yeah, we talked too long.
Sorry about that. That keeps telling me.
Later in October, the state health bond committee.
Yeah.
I don't know why I wrote that down. Must have gotten it out.
They will be coming to WASICA, the Senate Bonding Committee. Let's see if I can find that quick.
To talk about the water tower.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the 24th of October. I think that's what.
I said Senate State House Bonding Committee, Thursday, October 24th, 2:30 to 3:15.
Same time. 2:30. Thanks, Jay. All right. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Commissioners. As far as I can confirm, that's the city building.
City
City hall.
public safety. Or city hall, city hall.
City hall is what I'm seeing, okay, we may have to get clarification on that. Carl, council chairs. Yes, in the council chambers. There you go. I just scroll down further. Putting together some additional levy survey information. I sent you just a preview, I think that was the end of last week maybe, of what I had collected to date, but as I continue to acquire that information, AMC actually sent out a formal MACA survey this morning, which will expedite that process, I'm sure. So that's just kind of helpful for you folks to see what some of the neighbors are doing and where they're landing in terms of numbers for 2024. But I am also trying to acquire that same scenario, but from a tax rate standpoint as well. It'll be a little bit more involved, but we should be able to get there by the time you're approaching that final budget setting meeting in December. So I'd like to get a full statewide list of county tax rates.
Less.
Literally over the last 3 to 5 years to kind of see how that's trended. And so that's kind of the grade to you, so to speak, for the work you've been doing from the levy standpoint, applying that down over time. And I think you'll be happy with the movement there from where we started in first having this conversation in 2020 going into 2021 to today going into 2024. So we'll get that put together for you prior to that December meeting as well. Still doing a lot of work with the city. I did have a conversation at lunch with Carl last week talking about EDA and where the county should be focusing as it pertains to EDA. Whether we are taking a more direct approach, or direct role, or if we should be on more of a partnership basis with our municipalities as a whole. The problem I have right now, it's not really a problem, but that's the word I'm going with anyway, is how our EDA board functions right now as kind of board appointed positions. It is good in intent. It is just little to no return in the actual effort. So what it has become from my perspective is simply another body, reported body that I am beholden to create topics and to go and communicate, here's what I'm doing, and then turn around and like, it's on every single agenda, member updates, and encouraging them to go talk to your friends and neighbors and businesses and come back with recommendations. That doesn't happen, and historically never has happened. Doesn't mean it couldn't, it just means that isn't the intent or the scope of the existing citizen appointed board. So it, in my estimation, needs to be reframed or rebranded or rescoped in a way that either gives them some sort of decision-making prowess and authority, or disbanded or shelved or reworked in collaboration with our municipalities as a whole. The other alternative is to have the county become more inward focused in the future and invest in some kind of community development coordinator whose role, whose job, whose life is literally to going out, meeting with the owner operators, meeting with the small business owners, getting an idea for what their wants, needs, and desires are, and then taking the actual county specific knowledge and programs and resources that are available and having a more educated conversation directly with them. That is definitely not what we're doing right now. I think that's what we want to happen. That's just not how it is happening. So I had lunch with Carl and broad range of that conversation, but also more collaborative in scope, saying, how can the county partner with the city right now? You have a position right now, they have an EDA individual that is partially funded by their EDA board, and they have, the difference being is they have a taxing authority, EDA, we do not. So they levy dollars for, as an economic development authority, we do not. So essentially, Tina, 50% of Tina's wages are paid by the city, 50% are paid by the EDA. That's how that works. And so my question is essentially, how could the county offset a small portion of those wages with a template, a printed template for, here are all the things this individual can go out into the communities, not just city of Waseca, and facilitate those conversations on our behalf and say, here's what the county has built. An example of that would be the county board several months ago took that $250,000 allocation that was originally framed when we were talking about ARPA as tourism advocacy and infrastructure, rebranded it to revolving loan fund dollars as an option. It's still there, it still will be there until the board chooses to do something else with that money if they do. But that is not an insubstantial amount of money when you're talking to a small business that needs to add on a space or whatever, you know. So having effectively a rubric from the county standpoint that this individual can speak on behalf of the county to a limited extent and say, here's where the county is willing to partner with the city, with the school districts on these type of initiatives. So it's trying to pull the school into it, cities into it, county into it, and keep it more collaborative and single sourced into individuals, so it's not being redundant with the conversations that are happening, but also pointed at the approach with one individual with all of the information of those organizations facilitating that conversation. So still ongoing conversations, I just put that out there.
So that would be, are you saying that we would be basically getting a portion of her time then to do stuff for the county?
Yes.
So she would go out into the other communities. If we were to pay 20% of her salary, we could get 20% of her time.
Yes, something to that effect.
Does Carl think that she has the capacity? Is there, or is she too busy right now, you know? Would it take another individual?
Carl likes the idea of it. What we need to talk more about is the county-wide presence versus the city-wide presence. The city-wide presence is an easy sell because it actually saves Tina time. Because it's not, hey, I just had this conversation, let me send you an email, here's a quick summary, let me know when we can get together and talk about it. She can speak on my behalf to a certain extent, and then she'll come back and say, this is ready to go, do you want to partner on it or not? That's the efficiency piece that's built into it, in my mind, which Carl very much agreed with and is in favor of.
Does the city ever talk about that bike trail scenario? You know, because that would be beneficial to the city as much as.
Yeah, we did talk about trails a little bit when I met with Alicia, Tina, and Carl a couple of weeks ago at the city. Part of what I assigned to Brian Tomford in 2024 is rekindling our master trail plan for the county. One, because there's some competitive funds out there right now that we need to chase into. It just kind of died in conversation several years ago and never rekindled. So it just, somebody needs to grab it and dust it off, revise it through today's date, and then figure out kind of a 5-10-year plan for our trails and how we want to look at investing. And a big piece of that is going to be collaborating with adjacent counties to connect some of those regional trail systems.
Yeah, I had a conversation with the Heartland mayor. And that railroad has been abandoned up to just south of Heartland. So they actually haven't been able to get, they're working supposedly on the trail in Freeborn County.
Yeah, right.
And, but to finish it into Heartland, he's having trouble getting that finished because of that abandonment portion. And so he was, talked to me about, the benefit of getting it all the way to at least in Richland.
Right. And that was an exact example Brian and I talked through.
Okay.
And so he was aware of that conversation too.
And I don't know if Chris Howard was here, he'd be going. But, because there's a lot of, the biggest aspects are all these failed culverts under the road. Those are gonna have to either be redone or taken out. If it wasn't a trail system, you just take them out of there, let the water go through. If it's a trail system, then you gotta bridge it or fix culverts. But that hopefully those grants that we can chase could help us with.
And I want to say that it was somewhere to the tune of about $30 million that was allocated legislatively to that environmental and natural resources fund. So when Brian was talking, the first thing is kind of, where's our plan? What's it say? Getting a hold of the DNR, making those connections. This is what we're attempting to do, utilizing them as the resource to offset more discretionary dollars as well too. And then identifying what those preliminary projects need to be, which we start, where we want to be in 10 years. So that's something I tasked him with in 2024.
Okay. Do you think him having a conversation with the Heartland mayor could help as far as,
Sure.
At least he could tell Brian what he knows, might help Brian.
Yeah, that would be helpful. So I kind of scoped it to him to get a hold of Mommy before she's out on maternity leave. So he has the last couple months of the year to get up to speed with where were we, what do we have right now.
Sure.
And try to create a position to launch into 2024 with some actual action plan.
Okay.
So, yeah, absolutely.
We're getting more and more traffic out at Corbin Park.
We are.
I did talk to Chris Lynn yesterday. And me personally, I would like to get rolling on an 18-hole green instead of, I don't want to just a couple and much thing out there. But my conversation with Chris was possibly doing something after harvest, right, as it's freezing up. If we could get some of that, get an idea and at least get some rocks moved in and stuff like that, and possibly doing it as a time and material type of thing to reduce costs, because he just doesn't, he can't put a real dollar figure to it. And if he could we could do a little bit this fall after harvesting, when it's starting to freeze. And then if there was any grass that needs to be fixed up or anything, he could do that right away in the spring, so it's decent for the year. But
So that was part of a conversation we had with this excavator as well, that increases our ability to move large rocks independently, obviously. We have like 5 piles of boulders around the county at this point, at least, that are willing to be donated. And we could accomplish that within a day or a weekend of effort from staff to just, if I tasked Teddy and or Chris to just go get all the rocks and pile them up. They could, Lens could use those to design it It's not gonna look exactly like they drew it out, because they would have the rocks ordered and delivered, they pick the ones they want and then send the others away. But it's workable. We've gone away from the engineered concept, or the tiered concept, I should say, the two-tiered concept, at least at that height, because there was an engineering implication and there was an insurance implication, and we didn't want to deal with either one. So that already kicks the cost down substantially. But the kind of unknown with the bid right now is the labor to get those things there and set them up. So if we get the rocks there, the boulders there, and they just have to move them around, or we move them around with our equipment, it's much more insubstantial in cost. So the hope would be, as Commissioner Krause was saying, is kind of set the staging area for spring, let it settle, and make it look nice in the spring.
Because they'd have to dig out just a little bit to be able to set those rocks in there. And once you get at least get that base done, we'll find them there, so.
I just think it's funny how many times a rock in its lifetime gets moved.
I know. And how bad do you want to get rid of them?
Yeah, we're picking up rocks that were thrown into a line fence. Picking up again, we'll throw them into a pile, and then 4 years from now, somebody will pick them up and put them around their house. You know, and just how many, now if we move all these boulders in the pile, them up, they'll use what they want, then we gotta take them boulders and move them out of there.
Well, the other thought was, we do have some notorious washout areas that we could bolster with some of the rock as well.
Sure, some of them ravines, yes, I'm sure they can be used.
And the footings and the foundations were laid yesterday for the bathroom. So that's on its way.
Footings were in there, so.
Sunday.
So that the septic is all designed and. Okay.
Just need something to move or.
Chris is probably on his way over to already.
We first had to go down to Albert Lea and then.
Oh, yeah.
HR announcements, you have those in front of you, nothing major to throw at you, ongoing recruiting activities as you see them. Nothing has changed in the last couple of weeks there. We have gotten some applications in for most of these, all of these. Other than the highway maintenance, but I actually don't know why we have that. It says cost.
Do you guys have any appetite to look at highway building or the 0.5 add-on maintenance worker on the 17th? I know we already have with community health board on the 17th. And I think you had it.
17th is BKB and work session.
Right. So, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
Do you need the work session talking through that?
Or.
Well, yeah, probably a work session, or how do you want to go about that?
You mean to put that from 0.5 to 1.0?
Right.
So as a reminder, it's in the budget as a 1.0 right today. In the current 2024 preliminary program.
So if we were to decide that, no, I would imagine the 0.5 has been in there ever since it's
Like the last 2 years.
yes. So if we say, no, we don't want another highway worker, it's probably about a $40,000
$23,000, I think, is actually the difference.
in wages.
Yeah, because it's not, from the wage
And
was,
then there's
the
benefits.
reduction of, we pull out all of the part-time that was in there as well. And it trades out any of the part-time budget for the 0.5 to 1.0, so 23, like 23.7 is the difference.
So do you think that if we were to get somebody hired, go to 1.0, get somebody hired, then you're saying that they wouldn't ask for part-time help next summer?
I don't know about summer, but there's two different ones. And they're there's always been an ongoing part-time budget allocation as well. Their summer program, I have to look at exactly how it looks. But we did go over that breakdown, and I could ask Jim to walk through that again. That's the asking about the 17th, I'm sure. But he already has all that put together. All the math is broken down, what would come out of the budget versus what would go into the budget. I know the grand total difference was a little more than 20 grand.
Well, next Wednesday, we would have a subcommittee, but I know that you don't want to dive into that on these days. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, even for him to come up with, here's the breakdown on that before we ever bring it to the board, or here's the breakdown on the building. I mean, we can wait till November.
Speaking of the 11th, 9:30, I have that date now, is the Justice Center review. So just kind of right after the public works, so
The 11th,
if you're able to.
That's our next public works.
yeah.
It is. Tell me a little bit if you're harvesting hours.
You know, yeah, once beans are out, then I get somebody else to run the accomplish for a little while. But right now, we're scheduled for 8 AM.
Yes.
Highway. Yeah,
You want to have some of those preliminary numbers for that meeting,
for that,
for the 11th?
for this,
For Jim, yeah, yes.
for our subcommittee.
Right. Just a breakdown of.
He hasn't already did that, has he? See,
He went through it, but I don't think we actually saw it on paper. I know he did it.
In limited fashion.
Yeah,
yeah, if he's got it, then yeah, let's see it again.
on paper.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he wanted that one person to do what?
It would be to, the main, and, yeah, so he could sew those pockets backwards.
Well, as he was describing it on the road tour,
It was mainly snow removal, getting that extra route, having an extra driver.
he did have some summer program description in there as well, but the biggest benefit is keeping the mechanic out of the snowplow. That's a really simplified version.
And nobody in the community or our residents can dispute needing more drivers in the wintertime when it's snowing, you know. But the trouble we run into is summertime, keeping those people busy, and at least looking busy.
Yeah, you don't need 3 guys, you can get by with 2 guys watching the payload.
I think his deal was, we're gonna try, if that's the case, we're gonna look into some of the ditch cleaning. I mean, it's just some, you know, we're already doing the brush cutting. So you had Kevin Lyons come in last year and Mark Harvard come back. You know, I think he was looking at, he knows Jared can keep them busy.
And that's my biggest concern is charity, because it's tough to get 12 guys, or whatever it is out there. Keep them, because you gotta have a job that 3 guys will go do this, and then, oh, right, 3 guys go do that.
At some point.
Part of the reality that he was mentioning too, it's never 12 guys in the summer.
Right.
It's 8 or 9. We effectively don't allow them to take vacation all winter. So their summer is their vacation time.
That guy's coming on, if you're bringing him on to do a task or a certain task, I'm okay with it, if that follows through. If he just comes on and then 2 months down the road, he's just ordered a whole bunch again, and you're not getting those tasks done, then it was the wrong thing to do.
Well, like I said, if you put them on, you still have at least 2 guys that are close to retiring. And if you think it's not working because there is idle time, then you don't fill those places at that time.
Right.
This is a position that's easily reversed through attrition, if that is the conclusion.
Right.
Okay. It's not a unique job description, it's one of many in the pool. And if the conclusion, 6 months, 12 months from now is we don't need it, then you don't have that. Next person that's out the door, you don't replace.
My last comment would be only be that Brian and I, when we first got on, we talked about with Nathan what service level we should be at. And I don't want to bring a guy on to add service. We just adding one. If we're bringing on a guy to be able to maintain our service level without less overtime or less fight to get part-timers, then I can buy into it. But I don't want to do it to add service because I think we're at the right service level.
Okay, in the interest of time, and the fact that Commissioner Walter has another meeting, I think we will forego commissioner reports. So at this time, if there's nothing else come before the board, we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.